I wanted to ask you about how you got the Sam Lay gig.
That was another time when that was in 1970.
It was when McGovern, right?
1970, probably 1971. Because
before the 72 election.
1971, I went back there again, kicked on Jerry's couch the next time, and I
Jerry should be getting paid more money.
You
should have started the rehab center, man.
Yeah, I kicked on Jerry's couch again, and then that time was not fun, man.
I bet
that was miserable, man, and then when I started to feel a little bit good, this guy, you ever know Mark Brombach?
Oh, yeah.
So Mark came over. This is when I met him. And he put up with some shit with me, too, boy.
See, I didn't know you guys knew each other.
Oh, man, he's a good guy, man.
Yeah.
And
Smoke Daddy.
Yeah. He opened a restaurant and bar later. That's much later. But this was like 1971. He came by, and this was like the first day I felt like, okay, I feel kind of halfway human. I can get up off the couch, whatever. Mm-hmm. I met him, and he was going over to Sam Lay's to rehearse because Sam was putting together a band to go up on the road with George McGovern, who was running for the nomination for the Democratic nomination. He was before the primaries and everything.
Right.
And so he was putting together a band. They were going to go play colleges because the 18-year-olds had just got the vote, and George McGovern was, going to end the war in Vietnam.
Right.
So
the
he was trying to appeal to the college kids, and back then, believe it or not, young people was who came to blues gigs.
Who would have thought?
It's the same people that still come to them,
That's
but they
right.
just ain't young no more. Man. So
blues gigs at colleges.
Yeah,
imagine
we used to
that.
play, man. When I was in Lay's band, even after the McGovern thing, we played at colleges all the time. That was the gig. I mean, I never played white clubs until I moved to Chicago.
Right.
Or for white people, really.
That's a trip.
But so I went with Mark over to Sam's just to hang out. I don't know. I just went with him. I didn't have nothing to do, but I brought my harps just in case. But he had already hired a harp player. But when we got there, that guy who was Chicago Slim, I don't know if you know.
I know who he is. Yeah.
So he had already hired him to do this gig, but he canceled on the rehearsal. Said he would, he couldn't make the rehearsal, but he'd be there later or something, or whatever. And so I just filled in, because he's doing a lot of muddy songs and low down songs, Slim Harpo and shit like that. Where harmonica sounds right on them. So I played, and he ended up like hiring me instead. And so I, like within days, I'm flying around, playing, for this presidential candidate.
Right. Well, didn't you say Warren Beatty?
Warren Beatty was there. He would he would introduce George McGovern and shit, so he's flying around with us, and we're flying around. We're staying in, nice hotels. Sheraton was all Sheraton hotels and nice hotels, man.
And did you have Eddie Taylor in the band as well?
Yeah, the band was killer, man. It was Eddie Taylor, Big Mojo, Detroit Jr.
on piano.
Yeah. And he was. I wish I had appreciated him more back then, man. But I didn't. I didn't know what a great songwriter that guy was.
Right.
And I don't know if I even Back then I wasn't writing.
He was around Chicago all the time.
Yeah.
You could see
So
him all the time.
him, and a guy named John Wolfe, who was a nice guy. He lived he's from New York, but
Guitar player?
Yeah, guitar player. And he's a guy who also I made use of his floor. and
Did you ever have an apartment in Chicago or barely?
I don't think I ever had a place that I paid rent on, man. I had a girlfriend.
Right, you had girlfriends
that I lived with.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I did, you couldn't call it really an apartment, but I did pay the rent. It was like one of those, was there a place called the Jonquil Hotel where you a room, SRO.
Right.
Single room occupancy.
Right.
One of those kind of places where you piss in the sink, or if you want to use the toilet, you gotta go way down the hall.
Way down the hall.
Communal plumbing.
Funky.
So for that I was responsible for.
Right.
I was a worthless dude, man.
So how long did you last in Chicago that time?
Longer. Much,
over a year?
A couple years. Yeah, I think I went home for a visit around Christmas time.
Right.
Because what happened was I was working with Sam. We did that. Yeah, and Eddie was in that band, man. That was so cool to know him.
Oh yeah.
And then we had.
He dug you, man.
I loved that guy.
He dug you a lot. I remember. I hooked him up on a gig with you guys when I brought him out. Yeah.
I remember when you brought him out. Yeah.
He didn't dig Little Charlie much though.
Well, Little Charlie was.
I mean, he was
hard to get to know.
No, he just goes, "You're a good guitar player. You ain't no blues player."
Oh wow! Back then he was kind of a blues player.
Yeah, but that was Eddie's take on it. Yeah.
But we that was a trip, man. That so I'm back there with all of a sudden I just got done kicking on Jerry's couch,
right?
And then all of a sudden I'm
You're
flying
doing
around
that,
with a presidential candidate and then a movie star and these guys that especially Eddie, man. I mean, he was a
reverential guy,
a
real icon,
man, an icon, totally, you know. And Sam was
Sam was an icon.
Sam,
hell yeah.
And then too we had Lucille Spann.
Really?
Yeah, she was a featured. We'd bring her up. And she would sing. And and I remember her from those Spivvy records.
Right. Right.
And Otis had passed already, but we had Lucille, and then we had Johnny Twist.
Oh, right. You told me about him,
man.
Yeah.
And he was a character, man. He was such a memorable guy.
Right.
And there was stuff about him that I thought was funny because he was a pimp.
Right.
But he was a very, what they call a chili pimp, just.
Did he own a record store, a club
later
or something?
Later on.
Yeah, he owned a record store later
on.
If
you could call it that. Man.
Yeah.
More like a junk store. But but I had been, with Fillmore.
Right,
I used to ride around with him after the gig, man. Always checking his traps, man. He had a brand new Fleetwood Brougham and all this stuff. And Johnny Twist had a Toronado with a Rolls Royce grill on it. It was just a whole different deal, man.
That's great.
So I thought he would, at the time.
Did he have a car phone that didn't plug in?
Who had that?
George
man?
Smith had that.
I remember somebody had that. God, I wish.
Yeah, George Smith had one. He would just he would take a regular phone from a house, and he didn't have it connected to anything, but he'd take calls.
I remember a guy like that. I can't remember who it was in San Francisco. Had a pink Princess phone,
right?
And he had the wire going into the ashtray,
right? Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. But Twist, he was country, he was at the time I was young, so I didn't really pick up on how really he was a cool dude, man.
Yeah,
He was smart. It sounded funny because he sounded ignorant, but he was smart, man. He said something that decades later, man. I remembered it, and I was like, man, wow.
Yeah, I remember you said something to me a long time ago.
He told me, here's what he told me. He said, see, Rick, it's two things you got to remember about this music business: ego and psychologicals. That's what he said. And it sounded funny to me, so I thought it was funny.
Right.
But then when I thought about it later on, when I was more, when I actually was capable of thought, I went, man, that's deep, man. That's some shit that is, because he wasn't talking about music. He was talking about the music business.
Right.
And he said two things you got: ego and psychologicals, man. If you think about that, when you're dealing with people, and you think about, you stroke their ego, or or you at least don't want to bruise their ego, and you make them feel good about themselves, and
that takes you a long way.
The psychological part, man,
takes you a long way.
Yeah, you can, because especially in a scene like this, it's so small and
so easy to burn bridges,
and
it's real easy to burn bridges, and I mean, if like that whole thing of like knowing, well, you put it right in the basket, is that knowing how to deal with people is such a huge part of the entertainment industry.
Well, and especially in this part, like in the real entertainment industry, I don't know much about it, but in the blues and this little
subgenre,
kind of thing, where it's a small world, and you actually have access to the people that can, that that you need to have a working relationship with. You know what I mean? You actually know them. So they'd much rather do something for somebody they like. All things being equal. So it's just.
I remember the days when I used to think to myself, I go, man, that guy's so much better than this guy. How come he's not famous? Like, I couldn't put that together. That it was like, it wasn't about how good somebody was necessarily. It was about, like you say, how they make people feel.
And it's about how they make the audience feel.
And how they make the audience feel.
Because you don't have to be, there's guys that are great, man, but the audience may not really connect up on
with
them, And so it's, that's what I realize is that, all in people, man, some of them are really limited, and maybe it's, I don't want to listen to them, but they got something. They got appeal. One somehow, and that's something Rodger Collins used to try to tell me too, and I can hear him because he's been saying this. I still know him, and we're still friends. And he's been saying this all along. He would tell me, Rick, it's many things. It's many things. So it's not just about
not just one
play,
thing,
man. I mean, we've known guys that could really play
and got nowhere.
Man. For
Absolutely.
whatever reason,
Amen. Well, I remember you said something a long time ago to me that really stuck, where you said, like with a lot of the old timers, just how there was kind of almost like a mother, what would you call it, mother wit, or like, like they knew enough about life to kind of be able to travel through it without an education.
Oh yeah, man. Those guys, they're,
there was a lot of,
there's a lot of them guys. I mean, they didn't have the benefit of even a elementary school education.
Exactly.
They would be
couldn't
out
read
there
or
in the
write
field and stuff, and can't read or write, but they knew how to get where they
navigate,
to go, and I mean it's crazy too to think about, like, guys that were touring,
I know,
and they just knew direct. They couldn't read the signs, but
Right.
they just would memorize.
Oh
stuff,
yeah,
man.
yeah. I mean, Willie Smith was like
Willie
that.
was like that. Man.
Willie was big time like
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
And he drove all over.
he drove
this country,
everywhere.
man.
Yeah,
You know, and
yeah. I think Cotton was kind of like that to
Cotton
a certain
couldn't read
degree.
or write, man.
Yeah, but I think he could do that. He could
Yeah, he
get
could
himself
do-
from A to B.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a heavy thing, man.
That
You
is,
start
man.
thinking
That's-
about that.
Yeah, and I remember when after I worked with Sam Lay, I was with Sam for pretty good little bit of time for me back then. You know,
Couple
maybe
years,
a year,
yeah.
maybe a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
I worked with him again later on, but I
Mhm.
worked with him maybe a year that time, and then after Sam, you know, because he was, I mean, I was not
No
no
picnic.
stellar human being, but he was kind of a dick too. Really, you know?
Right.
So we butted heads, and
Yeah.
and what happened? I think Wolf went somewhere, out of town
Mhm.
with his band, and Littlejohn borrowed Sam's band because maybe he didn't have a band then or whatever.
Right.
He borrowed some of the guys from Sam's band,
Mhm.
and we played at Silvio's with John Littlejohn.
Mhm.
And I had such a great time playing
Right.
with
I
him.
already a big fan.
And
of
he
his,
was
yeah.
so killer, man.
Yeah.
And it was just so much more like gratifying.
Right.
And I dug it too because, like I said, with Sam, we were playing colleges and
Right.
college type of if we played clubs, it was in college towns
Right,
and stuff
right.
like that. And Littlejohn, we were
Playing in the ghetto, yeah.
places, man.
Right.
So and he was just the coolest guy, man.
Yeah,
And that guy, man, when he would sing,
Yeah.
it just was like a knife.
He was a
man.
great singer.
Man.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was such a
Yeah.
just a wonderful person, man.
Yeah.
And so I just said, fucking stayed with him, man.
Interesting.
And
yeah.
we played a lot of different kind of places. You know, we would play in Geary and
Right.
play in Michigan City and play for, country transplanted
Right.
country people,
Right.
that
Real
worked
blues
in
audiences,
factories
yeah.
and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it was just felt so good to me
Yeah.
to be doing that and
Yeah.
stuff. And then Sam too, he was, I mean, I'm sure those gigs were better, but he was such a cheapskate. I made just as much money with Littlejohn, you know.
Did you made as much money?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
and he was the type of guy, man, he didn't feel right, not
Right.
giving you some kind of
Right,
minimum money,
right.
And I remember
That's another interesting thing too. That whole thing of how people leave the band. Like there's some people that are really fair about it, and there's others that are just cutthroat.
Sam would always
Yeah.
pay, but he was always a cheapskate, you
Yeah.
know. And another thing I did with Littlejohn, man, we had we tried to start a Blue Monday
Mhm.
at this place called Damon's Den on Roosevelt Road.
Mhm.
And if you don't have those things going for a while, man, I mean, it's rough because we were playing 4 to 4.
Wow.
That was the Blue Monday, 4 to 4. And,
Wow.
And we're starting it out, so
Unbelievable.
nobody would come,
12-hour
People wouldn't
gig.
come, people
Oh.
wouldn't, you need musicians to
Right.
think, oh, this is the cool place to be.
Right.
So we got it going okay after
Yeah.
a while, but man, 4 to 4.
That's
Eddie was on that
unbelievable.
gig the first couple weeks.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was really cool, but he didn't want to do it too long. Because nobody would,
Right.
you had to actually play that long, man.
Right. No, I remember. I used to do back-to-back gigs like that.
If you get
Yeah.
it going,
Right.
where people are sitting in, you
Right.
don't have to play the whole time,
Right.
But that was a trip. And I remember one night, man, this was like just goosebumps, man. So Hound Dog Taylor
Oh yeah.
had that first Alligator
Right.
record
You told
out,
me about this.
and
yeah.
he was feeling like, man, I'm big shit now,
Right.
And he had, his little natural wig up curling up on the
Right.
edges and shit, and he had a brand new like real trench coat, like
Right.
long brown leather coat,
Right.
and just acting like he walked in. I mean, this is filtered through my brain, so he might not have been tripping like that at all. But he walked in like there was a counter along. This was a long, place with the bandstand way at the end, and there was a counter along one side and a bar along the other side. So Hound Dog Taylor's walking in, and he's like greeting the people on the sides, people sitting at the counter and the people sitting at the bar, and ooh, Hound Dog Taylor's here, And Littlejohn got on the mic and he says, he hadn't played slide yet, and he said, well, I just want you to know I ain't trying to cut nobody's head. I just doing my regular thing I do everywhere I go, And he started doing It Hurts Me Too. And he just kept playing. And a verse after verse, man, just playing it. And he didn't start singing. And I'm thinking, man, when he starts singing, it's all over, man. Because he was such a killer singer.
Yeah, he was a great singer.
But he just kept playing, and it was just so, I was, all the hair on my arms was standing up. It was just so emotional, and so powerful. And he just kept playing and playing. Then he walks up to the mic like he was going to sing, I thought. Yeah. And he walks up to the mic and just dropped his head and shook his head like this here and picked his head back up and he just goes, "It hurts me too." And backed up and just kept playing something, man. It was so soulful, man. It was so awesome, man. It was just...
it was a message. He was sending a message.
It was just great, man. That guy was something else, man.
That's awesome.
He was something else. I worked with him, and the one gig we had that was not like those kind of gigs was we drove to Toronto, Canada.
Right.
When we drove to Toronto, and we played this place, the Colonial Tavern.
For a week. Right.
It's a week-long gig.
Right.
Man, and we played there every night, man, and that was really cool.
That was a famous club.
It was cool, and this was really something too, man. It's like, okay, so our first night there, I guess T-Bone Walker had just finished the week before.
Wow.
So he was still hanging around. Maybe he met a chick up there or something.
Right.
And he was still there, and Littlejohn was just like, wow. It was just so, T-Bone Walker was there,
no
man.
kidding.
And
huge.
And T-Bone sat in with us, man, on the whole second set.
Wow.
Played piano.
Right.
Second set, man. And Littlejohn was just like on top of the world.
Oh, that's
man.
cool.
He was so proud and so happy.
I bet.
Man,
That's awesome. Yeah. He's on one of those European folk blues festival things, playing piano with Jimmy Reed and
wow.
And John Lee Hooker.
Wow.
Yeah, he plays piano with those guys on there. Yeah.
At that time, I didn't know he played piano.
Right. I didn't either until I watched that.
But that was really
That's
cool.
awesome. Did he play guitar at all? Really?
Just played the piano the whole set.
That's cool, man.
Played the whole set,
so cool.
man.
So after that, then you ended up making it back to San Francisco?
I went back to San Francisco, probably started fucking up again.
Mm-hmm.
Went back to Chicago, played with Sam Lay again.
Mm-hmm.
And that time, I remember I played with Sam for a while, but I was really...
Pretty far gone.
You understand, in the progression of my disease up here, I was pretty far gone, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, have, like I always used to try to dress sharp and all that stuff, even though I was fucked up,
Right.
I had some pride about me, and by then I wasn't even...
Just didn't even try.
And I was just... had a terrible attitude, and I was playing with Sam again, because he was like happy I came back, but then
but not for long.
But I was, I didn't, not like I sounded that bad or anything, but I just had a shitty attitude, and I remember Jimmy Johnson was in the band then.
Oh, okay.
And he doesn't even remember this,
right?
because I reminded him
Did you?
later
Okay.
on.
Yeah.
Because one night he told me, he goes, you know, you're a good harmonica player. He goes, but you seem really unhappy. He says, you don't seem like you're enjoying the gig at all.
He picked up. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so I can remember, like, I can't remember what, Sam told me something, and I went, hey, you know what, fuck you, and I just walked off the bandstand.
Yeah. Right.
And I ended up coming back and home, and, you know, I don't know what I did, but I don't know when, I can remember this too, yeah. So after that, I hooked up with some guy in Chicago, and he was a dope fiend. He wasn't a musician. He was a dope fiend. Nice guy, you know. But he had a scam where he had a truck that had a phony business name on the side of the truck, and we would go like on the south side, especially on I think it's King Drive now. I think it was South Parkway or something. South Park, and there was all these mansions and stuff.
Right, the old mansions.
The old dilapidated, you know, mansions.
Right.
Some of them had been subdivided into apartments. Some of them were just vacant, you know.
Right.
And we would go in these vacant mansions with hard hats on and stuff.
Pull out the electrical wiring or something?
No, we didn't pull out wiring. We pulled out like mantles.
Okay.
Cut and beveled glass.
So basically antiques.
Stained glass, and then we would go up to Clark Street, where I think it was Clark Street, where the antique shops were, and we'd sell that stuff.
Okay.
And it's shooting dope. And, you know, at one time I would have thought that was slick, but by then I was just disgusted with myself.
Disgusted with yourself, yeah.
I was just disgusted with myself, and that's when I went back home the last time, and I
got on methadone.
Got back on methadone again. But I had that chick that was, you know, my girlfriend she was turning tricks and stuff, but I couldn't even bullshit myself into thinking I was pimping her.
Right.
I just felt so low, you know.
Right.
And then when that guy, you know, when I was young, I was, you know, being an idiot, looking at that movie, man, I could play better than that motherfucker. And the guy, shoot.
That's when you just had it.
I was sick of myself. I had it with myself. And I just...
made a conscious effort.
Yeah. It took me years after that before I quit drinking, because drinking was not a problem.
Yeah, drinking isn't quite like heroin.
Drinking didn't seem to
I mean, I'm not saying it can't be.
Oh, it can be.
It can be
but
big
it took
time,
a while to turn into any kind of problem for me,
Right.
because I just felt like, wow, man, drinking ain't so bad.
Well, a lot of people, I think, heroin addicts.
This is cool. It's legal, man. You know.
And a lot of heroin addicts go from.
You get tired of being a criminal, man.
Yeah.
You know, I know I did, man. And drinking worked okay for a few years, really.
Yeah, well, that's how it is.
But
You were finally fed up with the drug life, and actually made the call to Little Charlie.
Yeah, I called Little Charlie. You know, he had some kind of funky gig. I think I can't remember what the first gig. There were two places where we played those first.
So how long before you actually moved to Sacramento?
It wasn't long. I think I took a Greyhound up there maybe 2 times. You know, maybe a couple weeks apart, and then the next time I took a Greyhound up there, I never came back.
Wow.
Yeah, I stayed on Steve Samuel's couch. Till I could find a girlfriend with a job. Right,
and then you ended up like with a few day jobs during that time.
Later on, when I got some self-respect,
Or you worked at did you work at a rice?
I worked at a rice mill.
Rice mill, yeah.
Yeah, I worked at a rice mill. That was pretty cool. I used to, you know, like take pride in sliding out of work or doing, you know, sneaking by thinking I was slick or something.
Right.
And I learned how to, you know, especially from like a lot of Mexican immigrants.
Right.
that's where I really learned how to work, man. There was a lot of guys like that, man.
Right.
Guys from Mexico working there that really were, proud of doing a good job and trying
Right.
to do as good a job as they could,
Right.
And also, Little Charlie was like that too. He was a guy that he worked at his
Worked at his job.
worked
Yeah.
at his
Yeah.
job,
Yeah.
and playing with him gave me a sense of pride and felt like I was doing something.
Well, one of the things about Charlie that I noticed right away when I started working with him was just that if you played with him, you were not going to be content to rehash. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you mean like
Rehash the same stuff that you kind of had to keep
he was always
inventing stuff to stay on his plane where he
I
was.
had a whole and that was great for me.
And it was great. Yeah.
That was great.
That's a good thing.
Because I had to learn to do something.
Right.
Because I had to figure out some way to not be an afterthought.
Kind of to be keeping up, yeah.
To keep up and
yeah.
to not be an afterthought with him, man. So I had to come up with my own. And I ended up being able to write songs, which was a good way for me to.
Right.
Yeah.
You were, such a big part. Obviously you were a bigger part of the band in a way than he was, to the extent of that you were the front, the first person people would see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I got to be Charlie for.
Right, that's what I'm saying. You got to be Little Charlie. Right. When he jumped ship, you guys played 31 years together, son? Yeah. And when he finally left, I remember how freaked out you were.
Oh, I didn't know what I was going to
do. When that happened, and it was
also because he had said he was going to quit.
I know, you told me it was almost
like an annual thing. He always told me that, so I didn't believe him.
Yeah, it was kind of like what is the story?
Cried wolf.
Yeah, the boy who cried wolf.
So, I didn't know what I was going to do, man, because he, I had it made really in a way.
Right, because you were not the boss.
He was a control freak in a way, and so he did everything, and the only thing he would do was like when it's time to make a record, he'd just get on my ass about
writing
songs. Got any
songs?
You need to get some songs,
Right.
And other than that,
you were basically just having to walk on stage, and that was it.
Yeah, that was my only responsibility: show up on the gig, come up with some songs.
Right.
So when he was really going to quit, I was like, kind of like, wow, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And at the same time, Jay, who was playing drums with us at the time, and Lorenzo, they wanted to keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
But I was really thinking, because to me, Little Charlie was an awesome musician, man. He was very compelling, and people
definitely responded to what he did. Big time.
So I didn't want to just get somebody that was really good trying to do something similar to him.
Right.
Because it would just be, why, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I didn't know what to do, and I went and played in Brazil. Flavio, you know Flavio?
Right, yeah.
He had been in touch with me year after year to come down there and
do a gig, do a tour.
A little tour, and I never would do it because I just said, I got a gig, fuck, who cares,
Right.
I mean, I like it and everything, but, I'm lazy.
Right.
And but then when Little Charlie, when I realized he's really going to quit, then I got off my ass and I committed to doing that with Flavio. I think that was in February or something.
Right.
And I also, then I thought, well, I need something to sell, so I made a little do-it-yourself CD.
Right, which is a great CD.
And we still sell them.
Yeah, it's a great CD.
A little do-it-yourself CD, and I also made harmonica instructional thing, which is really cool and different, man.
Right.
And because I knew I needed to teach people my name.
Right.
Just to even know my name, because
So you weren't just Little Charlie,
people would
yeah.
think, because,
Right.
even today, man, I sometimes hear that shit.
Do you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, not as much, but
I was gonna say, I mean, it almost seems to me like you guys now have almost eclipsed.
Yeah,
I think you guys have eclipsed what it was with Little Charlie and the Nightcats.
Yeah, just because it was so long ago.
I mean, as far as like being a national act.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
international.
Somewhat, yeah, I think.
I think in the Bay there was a time when you guys were really pretty high up there on the food chain in the Bay.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think internationally and nationally, you guys have really
yeah.
eclipsed it.
You're doing. I'm grateful, man. We're doing all right now, So I was kind of surprising in hindsight, like the way I was able to get off my ass and put those things together so quick, because I was, because I really was kind of scared,
I remember,
and freaked out, man. Like, what am I going to do?
You called me and said, "How am I going to lead a band?"
Yeah, I didn't want to.
Yeah,
because I just thought, man, what a bunch of responsibility, man.
And it is, yeah.
And I thought, well, so I went down there and I played in Brazil, and he hooked me up with Igor.
Right.
And I was in touch with Igor prior to going down there because he wanted to know what songs I was going to do. And so I was telling him these songs, they were my songs, and he was like, "Oh, that's a classic," And that's when I realized that there were young guys
that were already,
that just like we learned from the guys we learned from, well, they learned from those guys too, and they also learned from us.
Right.
And I was like, wow, man, and then I went down there and I was like, fuck, guys could play, man.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, shit, I could just be like a, lower level.
Chuck Berry.
Chuck Berry, yeah, exactly, man. I could just go around. I wouldn't have to worry about looking out for, other guys in the band, and I could just fly around with no, with only responsibilities I had would be the same ones I had then, which is show up, and be who I am.
Exactly.
So I was thinking that, and at the same time, Jay and Lorenzo wanted to keep it going, but I swear I couldn't think of anything, But then I was talking to Kid on the phone one day, and he had helped me make that record, and because that might have been his first production, and he told me that he had just he had quit Charlie, and Nemeth had fired him,
because of his drinking,
and I just went, hey man, we want to try playing together, and he said sure, and
that's when it started,
started, man, and it was funny, man, I mean,
and how many albums have you guys done?
It was just like serendipity. Man.
Yeah,
it was just like,
just meant to happen.
Seamless,
Yeah,
and it was great. Like when we first started this band, we had a gig at this festival, kind of a small festival in Washington State called Sunbank Festival.
Oh yeah, Kid Sunbank.
Yeah, because Kid knew that guy. The guy was a fan of Kids. So, So he got us on that. So we're on that, and we didn't have a record out or anything yet, And Kid had his own record out, so he was over at the CD area, and some woman came up to Kid and she goes, "Well, why'd you change the name of the band?" And he said, "Well, Little Charlie quit the band, so we had to change the name." And she's got this confused look on her face, and she was just like, she goes, "Man, that new guy you got looks just like him." So
that was great.
It's been like
that was great. It's been like that for a long time.
Like when we did have a record out, and we're touring, and I remember we were in Ithaca, New York, and we had the first album out, and
the first Rick Estrin album.
And a woman came up and she bought a record and she wanted me to sign it, and so I signed it, and she goes, "Oh, thank you, Charlie." And Jay,
Yeah.
you know, I just was like, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Jay goes, you know, actually, that's Rick Estrin. If you look at the record, it says that on there. And, you know, Little Charlie was the guitar player in the band, and he left the band, and she got mad at Jay, man. She goes, I don't care what you want to call him. He's always going to be Charlie to me. You know, so it's pretty.
That's
pretty
great.
Fun. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
diminished a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I now people know my name more.
Right,
more.
right,
So,
definitely.
Yeah.
So how long has that been? That's been.
I bet you, yeah. And I think if I just keep plugging away, I think, but when I'm like 90,
Right. No one's going to call you Charlie anymore.
Almost no.
Almost no.
Yeah.
So how long have you and Kid been playing together now?
Since '08, beginning of
Wow.
pretty
Amazing.
Pretty, and Lorenzo been with me over 20 years.
That's
man.
amazing. Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's real good at what he does.
Oh man, he's killer, man.
I mean, I'm not saying just musically. I'm saying just he seems to really keep everything
He was always
together
the
in terms of
glue
business.
in this
Yeah.
band,
Right.
Without Charles,
Yeah.
he was always the glue, and now he's taken a more proactive role. I mean, he does some of the booking out of the country. You know,
Did he really?
Yeah, he does some of the booking.
Wow.
You know,
So he helps on Europe and stuff?
Not in North America.
But in Europe and stuff?
In Europe,
Canada?
and not so much in Canada, but in Europe.
Yeah. And he
And
does
South
all
America too.
and he does all the travel and all that.
He does the travel arrangements. He does a lot of stuff.
Right,
And
right.
you know.
And then you got a guy that
he's
can
playing
record
his
you.
ass off. Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
you got,
perfect.
a kid that can record you, and then you got Demar now,
Yeah.
who's,
No, it's awesome. It's
Yeah.
fucking,
and like you're saying, everybody gets along and everybody's on the same page.
Everybody.
Yeah.
We're friends.
Yeah.
You know, we have a good time.
Yeah.
When we're not on the gig, we look forward to like driving
Right.
driving up and down Florida together and stopping at a Wawa and
Right.
partying down. Man, we were so happy when we saw that Wawa exists down here, man. I didn't know they had
Oh,
it
yeah.
here, man. They didn't
No.
used to have it here, man.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
All up and down.
yeah. So yeah.
So you guys got a new record coming out?
We got a new record in the can. Yeah, we just have to. I've been going back and forth with the record company about. It's always something,
Yeah, yeah. You
And
guys have been with Alligator, what?
I've been with
30-something
Alligator,
years?
Yeah, man. I mean, 1986.
Right.
we
So
signed with
almost
them.
40 years.
Yeah, so-
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm grateful as hell.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't always agree with all of Bruce's opinions or
Yeah.
anything, but man,
It's the label to be on. Yeah.
man, I mean, that's
For a blues business thing.
Hey,
Yeah.
man, I mean, I don't know where I'd be without him. I mean, I've owned my house outright for I don't know how long, forever,
years.
man.
Yeah.
Decades,
Right.
So, and that's strictly because, I mean, we worked hard, but having that record label behind you,
Yeah.
especially back in the day, man, that was
Yeah.
a big deal, man.
Big deal. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we got a new record. We're just trying to work out the cover art and stuff.
You have a
like
title
that. We're
for
kind
it?
of button heads on the cover art. Yeah, it's called The Hits Keep Coming.
The hits keep coming. Rick,
Mark,
always a pleasure.
great, man.
Yeah,
great
man.
Sorry I ran my mouth so much.
No, that's what
But
I
guess
want.
that's what you're looking for.
I'm looking
You're
for that.
interviewing
Yeah,
me.
absolutely. All right, Rick Estrin.